Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is your ultimate guide to understanding the do's, don'ts, and complexities of the higher ed social media ecosystem. Host Jenny Lee Fowler from MIT brings her expertise and passion for social media to the table. Each episode offers a deep dive into real-world examples, dissecting what worked, what didn't, and identifying valuable lessons along the way. You'll get the key insights and tips to help you elevate your own social media game. Make sure your social media efforts hit the mark every time. Subscribe to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or search for it wherever you love to listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Higher Ed Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another wonderful episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. This one is really a treat for me, interviewing somebody who I've really looked up to for a long time, reaching an incredible milestone with their organization and their work, the University Innovation Alliance, Bridget Burns, Dr. Bridget Burns. So I'm really excited to have this conversation, ask a bunch of things that are on my mind. I want your perspective on. But we'll start out as we do. If you want to introduce yourself really quickly, if folks don't know you, the work that you do, just kind of a quick summary, and then we'll get into all the questions that I have for you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I always appreciate, I find the work that I do and talking about it, it's so boring by myself. I appreciate any interest. And I also just, as someone who's also a nerd about digital marketing and these other industries and how they accelerate the amplification of ideas, it's just, I think you and I are kindred spirits. So anyway, thanks for having me. Yeah. And about me, I'm the CEO of the University Innovation Alliance, which is a consortium of universities who have decided to team up to try and actually scale ideas that work to dramatically improve outcomes for students. And I help do a little bit of everything to make that happen.
Yeah, I know we're talking a little bit before we got on, and you're just remarking on sort of just the scrappy entrepreneurial mentality that you have, kind of doing the work that you do, which is really incredible work, and made that much more incredible, I feel like, knowing that you are just kind of, like you said, duct taping your way to kind of doing things. Because I think it shows when people come together and are really focused and kind of have the willpower to kind of, make it happen, great things are possible. And I know, so it's been 10 years of UIA, and there's, that milestone, that celebration coming up. There's the summit coming up. So we'll talk about that as well. And I know you mentioned sort of the kindred spirits and sort of the digital marketing, content creation that you've been really consistent with. And I'm a fan of, and I follow. I just kind of want to examine that, I guess, explore that you've really made that commitment to do it and make sort of the knowledge sharing accessible to people through the live streaming and, curating it through podcast feeds and everything. What has that experience been like for you, and why is it important, for you to do that?
So I feel like our conversation is causing me to be very nostalgic and reflective based on the earlier parts. So I guess the piece I need to share is that the Innovation Alliance is focused on, it was initially 3 buckets: innovation, scale, and diffusion. And that came from when trying to build this from scratch, the literature about innovation, right? I didn't even have that language at the time. And so all of the live streaming and all of the work that you see me do publicly is really about noticing a problem and trying to solve it through any means possible. And that is that the diffusion of innovation in higher ed was moving way too slowly when I first started. I want to believe that I was always an entrepreneur, but the truth is when I first met Michael Crow, like in 2013, when I was an ACE fellow and I was trying to see if he would let me be his ACE fellow, I got to ASU and he agreed that he said that I was a bureaucrat, that I needed to become an entrepreneur, and that we were going to have to break the bureaucrat, break it out of me. And it worked. I mean, it did. I don't even know, like, I think it was living on an air mattress and trying to build something that was impossibly difficult and chasing him around, that somehow I knew that there couldn't be a specific plan. I let go of a need for things to be perfect because it was, we were going to be lucky if it was going to get there. So I think there's partially that. And then also, I think there's just always been an outsider perspective that I've had. I don't feel like an insider really. And that has given me permission to be more entrepreneurial, because I don't feel like I need to follow the rules, because those are your rules. And I don't even know that I snuck in this room. And so there's a little bit of permission that to make messy. So diffusion of innovation, this work is higher ed specific, but early on, with the borrowed authority of Michael Crow, who's the founding board chair, and my boss, I feel like the clarification that around diffusion of innovation as being a real problem was, and it's still something that I struggle with to this day. That is why I think that trying to figure out how to accelerate idea spreading online mattered so much. In the first year of the Alliance, I went to more than 50 institutions, and I went around and I asked them all about what things they were doing that were innovative about student success. I manually flew. I got like platinum Marriott lifetime, very quickly. And I showed up and I would just interview senior leaders to what do you think you're doing that's really good? And then I would always ask the second question of, what is it that you think someone else in another institution around you is doing that you think is innovative or interesting? And I never had any senior leader answer that question, that second one. And I was like, holy cow, I think that we're too afraid to admit we don't know what each other's doing. I think that we're all too busy posturing and preening and seeming like we're Dr. So-and-so and fancy pants and important. There's something about how higher ed, in order for your idea to be out in the world, for it to be worthy, it has to be peer reviewed and in a journal and polished and has a literature review and you have your bibliography perfect. There's something about the way that we have trained ourselves to share ideas that has made it very slow. And when it comes to this space of student success, it's made it very ineffective. And so that was why I started down the road of trying to learn from other industries that accelerate ideas, that try to watch, how is it that you get, and technology is such an easy space, right? Because you can watch how someone is learning. I mean, I actually found really interesting spaces like multi-level marketing, which as toxic as that space is, super interesting to watch how someone who is not a quote unquote professional, who's doing a sales job, is coaching other people and teaching them how to replicate their methodology using kind of ad hoc things that they can use. I just find that there's really interesting spaces, if you just lean in with curiosity, that we could try and learn from, that didn't look anything like how ideas were spreading in higher ed. And the only way ideas were spreading for me was people would move from university to university in a new job. And that was very rare, very rare. Conferences where you get kind of hit in the face with 1,000 ideas. And I hope you remember it all. And good luck. I know you're exhausted and you've just eaten a huge carb buffet and you get home and your email inbox is overwhelming. And that can't possibly be effective. And we're spending millions of dollars on that, by the way, as a methodology to spread ideas, when all I see is it builds connection, but it definitely does not accelerate that I know the right ideas to use and I can actually implement them. And lastly is publications, which that way too slow. So this is already a really long answer to your point, but I'm trying to lay the foundation here of so this problem is oh my gosh, this place, we're using methods that don't work for us, that we have this really high standard for whether or not something is rigorous enough that we trust it. And separately, I'm trying to get all these, at the time, 11 institutions to understand what each other's doing, to trust each other, to suspend reality and pretend like you aren't competing, to talk about the stuff that gets in the way. And and when they do that, finally realize, oh my gosh, it's all the same problems. So maybe we could try the same things. And to get them to like really understand what's worth their time. So I'm like on a meta level dealing with this, and then I'm noticing the sector. And so I finally, because I'm running this scrappy little startup, at the time I was like the only employee. I actually paid my own salary the first year using my prior contract at the Oregon University system. I was the chief of staff. And so I started just trying stuff, and I didn't feel like I had the pressure to make things feel university-like, because I was like, there was literally a couch, or there was a chair in our house that my partner called the world headquarters, because I was just like, I had to learn how to build our website from scratch. I used GoDaddy. I bought the domain. Why is it called the UIA.org? Well, because UIA.org was taken. I had to start our Twitter channel and figure out how to tweet. And so for the whole first year of the UIA, our Twitter experience, when Twitter was a cool thing, it was just me retweeting, because I was terrified of saying something, bad. Or wrong. All of it has been by trying something and having just a little bit of grace to make it messy. And so in 2016 or 2018, we finally have our first summit, which is our first event where we invite people from outside the UIA. They come, and at that event, I committed on stage that I was going to start live streaming every week, as like a little bit of a dare. But it was mainly I was trying to challenge the sector that like it's too slow. There are good ideas that work. We take way too long for them to be adopted. We've got to find a way. And so, very long story short, that in 2018, I started live streaming. I consumed all digital marketing content I could on YouTube. I followed a lot of mentors. I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I just try and replicate or test those strategies in in our space. And I feel like I made a lot of messy, and I hope that I gave permission for other people to make messy. Because that's what I wished existed. And most of what I'm doing is trying to make things I wished existed before I started. Like, I would have wanted the UIA Fellows program, because that's a cool, interesting job that would have actually made me want to work at a university. I wish that Weekly Wisdom existed, because it was really hard. I just saw that when presidents try and do stuff that's difficult, especially in COVID, they would just get lambasted if they opened their mouth. And I wanted to make it so that it was safer for them. And also I was just like, this is a really hard job. People are not going to want to do these jobs if we keep making it so difficult. And so I created that show because I wanted people to stay in those jobs and to not be, I wanted to elevate them as leaders, right? So anything that we've done, it's like, what needs to happen, what needs to exist. And then I try and make a messy prototype. And I just hope there aren't enough eyes on me doing it, or there's enough grace that people understand what we're trying to do. Like, I'm the one who suggested to Jeff Salingo to start a podcast, which leads to Future You, right? So therefore I take all credit.
Yeah. Are you in the credits, Yeah.
I'm like, I am responsible for Future. No.
Yeah. Another great show. I'm a huge fan of that one as well. And I think, that it's really refreshing, I guess. And I appreciate you kind of going into like the full like behind the scenes story of it, because I think that idea that like we were talking a little bit about this before we got on too, of like the idea of like the perception of people, or the perception of like when you create stuff, or you're maybe like sharing a success story and all that. Like, I do think it is a crucial element to take a moment at some point to acknowledge kind of like the messy journey to launching it, or that it's like, well, if you go back to listen to episode 1, it's going to look a lot different than like this one. Like, we've deliberately been very thoughtful about like, we want to make this the best version that it can be, but we're also not going to let that prevent us from like creating, prototyping, launching, and all that. And then even just I think it's really important what you mentioned too about like the idea that like this was just really important to exist, to try to like change a paradigm, a mindset, and like that, that grace and the sort of like receptiveness is because like I feel like there's such a gap, or such a like a hunger people didn't even know they had, or an itch that people didn't even know they had, that was starting to get sort of addressed and everything. So they're like, I'm like, give me anything, whatever you got, like keep it coming, and it's like, okay, cool. That sort of reinforces and maybe sort of affirms and encourages you to keep going. And so yeah, I just loved kind of the whole behind the scenes. And I guess, yeah, like you said, hopefully that encourages more folks. I've been a podcaster for a long time and helped other people with their shows and stuff. That is just like, everybody's got a story to tell, everybody's got a perspective, and trying to kind of, make space for as much of that as possible, whether it's just people guesting, on shows, or people want to, kind of dive in themselves. But so I feel like there's so much stuff that I want to talk about, but yeah. If you have a response, yeah.
I also feel like the thing for me is like, I am a really, really curious. I find people really interesting. I want to know what makes them tick. I'm super curious. And I just felt like I had a lot of questions about how people actually do their jobs. And I feel like part of the reason that higher ed was becoming unsustainable is I saw a lot of people exhausting themselves, or that we were only projecting this very unrealistic, two-dimensional version of what it looks like to be a professional who is established and successful in higher ed. And for me, as someone who was out like shuffling from airport to airport, I'm wondering, like, how do you manage your sleep when you're on the road? Like, how do you get all your email done if you're in meetings nonstop all day? I have questions that I just don't feel like people were asking. And so a lot of this also starts by being rooted in genuine empathy and curiosity about, like, I am looking for answers. I don't think I'm the only one who wants to know about these things and who wants to understand the humans behind them. And so I've just tried to follow that curiosity, and people have been incredibly generous and supportive. And I feel very, very lucky to be able to keep doing this stuff. And again, don't tell people, because I think part of it is, again, that permission feeling, like that nobody's watching. I feel like, I'm going to try it. It's okay. It's okay if it's messy.
Yeah, that's like sometimes like the tragedy is like a show gets too big and then everybody's got an opinion about what it's supposed to be, or this or that, the other thing. And it's just like, I just want to make my thing. But now that everybody's looking at it, they're going to be like, you should do more of this, do less of that. You get like, all right, well, I'm going to do that. But then I pissed off all these other people. Or whatever. It's like, yeah, if you get the right niche of people sort of clicked in, it's like, we're all in agreement that like, we like this is good. We're going to keep doing it this way, whatever. But I guess just to move on though, because I know a big topic that I wanted to talk about that I'm curious your perspective on is about just sort of like institutional closures, mergers and acquisitions. Like, it's something that just sort of is like this continual drumbeat, I feel like, that's happening if you're sort of keeping an eye on a lot of the headlines coming out. So, there's this prediction that is sort of playing out that an institution is going to close every week this calendar year. That seems to be happening. Do you feel like, what do you make of that, I guess? And do you feel like this like helps or hinders the field? Like, what's sort of like your take on just sort of like seeing like those headlines that keep popping up about like institutions closing across the country?
So I think it's sad. I feel bad for the people who are affected most of all, right? Like, I feel bad for the students and the human beings who are going to be affected, because there's a lot of hidden costs and consequences that we're not going to see. There are communities that have been the absolute cornerstone has been a university, and maybe it's a small university, and maybe it's a private university, and you don't like that kind of university, and maybe you think that their success rates aren't good enough, but that has been a lifeline for that community. And we have to really understand that there's going to be a real devastating effect in every one of those cases. So that's one, is sad. And on the other hand, I completely understand that this was preventable. We have been immune, or we have been tuning out very strong signals for quite some time. And when the public or students have communicated a very clear point of view about, like, hey, this doesn't seem like this works for me, or this should be better, we've just been able to, because we've held the keys to mobility and status and prestige as like in our pocket, that we've somehow been able to ignore a lot of that feedback over time. And this is our chickens coming home to roost, right? Like, we needed to make it so all institutions were doing a better job for students. If you're doing an amazing job and you're not needing to primarily focus on limiting your inputs so that what you do is good, right? If you really can take a student from no matter what their background is and get them through in 4 years with a meaningful credential of value that changes their family's life, positions them for the workforce, and they have limited student loan debt, and like all these things. If you're doing that, you're doing fine. You're fine. It's actually that we've had some issues that we need to deal with for a long time as a sector, and I feel like this drumbeat of institutions closing is devastating and terrible on a localized level. It is going to turn the heat up on the rest of the sector, that we can no longer tolerate a lot of our values that were toxic and continue to be toxic. We've been focusing on the wrong things, thinking about the wrong things, and we've been tuning people out. The fact that there's an aversion to the word customer service still, even now, when we're talking about something that people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on, we're going to get over that. We got to recognize that like these institutions, we needed to be more efficient. The way that this all goes back to diffusion too, by the way. Like I was thinking about this earlier, is that, when we first started, the word student success was not used. I didn't come up with it, but we are the ones who made it go viral, because it was originally, when the Alliance started, it was college access and it was 4-year graduation rates. And we start this drumbeat because we're trying to make it so that doing this particular work of redesigning your university around the needs of students, particularly low-income first-gen students of color, like this is the meaningful work. And it wasn't getting attention. It wasn't sexy or cool. All these other national associations and organizations that talk about it now, which I love, were not doing this work back then. They were focused, again, everything was access. It was graduation rates. It was, other things were a priority. And we needed to change that. We need to change what we value. But the way that you spread good ideas or best practices was mainly through the lane of the professional person working in a lane, working at that institution. So think about these colleges that are closing. They all probably have a director of financial aid. They probably have a bursar. They probably have now an enrollment manager. That job didn't exist before the 80s. There's this professionalization that happens back of the house. Those lanes, which one was in charge of student success? There's no answer, right? Until Tim Rennick at Georgia State, there is not a czar of student success or a person with a level of authority that they could actually drive change because they have a portfolio of the right size and all those roles scaffold up to them. And that took a lot of trust, and that took a long time for him. But now there's another, like we have that same position at University of Central Florida. I'm starting to see more. I just saw, I think University of Utah. I think there's others that are doing that. They're realizing this whole time, this thing that we needed to be good at, there wasn't a single person who could get fired if we weren't doing it well. And if you don't even have a role that is actually responsible, now think about best practices for roles. If the role doesn't exist and you have a bunch of people who are doing all these things in separate lanes, on top of each other, running into each other, they are not in charge of each other. One of the things that I noticed is there was like this mythology that if only we could figure out how to close equity gaps, if only. No, it's been done. It's been done. Let's stop. There are solutions to every one of these problems. We need to be doing things that are data-based. We need to actually be obsessed with the student, following them, asking the question of, are we the problem, which is what Georgia State does. We need to be scaling up things that are evidence-based that work. And we haven't been doing those things. We have been able to let students in, and if they make it, good. It's on it, then we'll take the credit. But if they don't, we blame them. And that is the reason why these institutions are failing, is that there have been failed over time that are out there working in the world, and they are passing along that story about how higher ed harmed them. And we in the sector have basically ignored that feedback and said that it was about them, or those are outliers for a really long time, when it was like we had a bag of garbage in our front room that we just were letting it sit there and we were ignoring it, So I think it's very sad. Institutions closing, bad. And I really worry about, especially in rural communities, how these are a lifeline. But on the other hand, this makes it so that nobody can put this off any further. You have to absolutely, whatever question you have about how to improve student success, there's now an answer. There's the National Institute for Student Success. There are playbooks out there. There are organizations who are doing this work. It exists. And so I think that we're going to actually do better because of this.
Yeah.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful. Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit enrollify.org to learn more.
Yeah, and I appreciate sort of the dual kind of acknowledgments there, and like the way that you frame that, because I feel like, yeah, there's been this sort of like paradigm shift over the last decade, and sort of as like kind of a general benchmark of like, yeah, that sort of notion of student success has become kind of more conventional thinking, and unfortunately, it is, I think, a lot of institutions or people will talk a big game, but like sort of the notion of your budget is where you actually live out your values. Like, are we staffing? Are we putting, people in place to be obsessed with the problem and to focus on it, as like their entire job, or is it being sort of, really kind of disparate and disconnected and all that? So I think that, yeah, like you said, it's like the urgency will only increase as you kind of keep seeing those headlines and everything. So I think it's a great way to look at it. And I think to kind of frame it, because I think about that too, is the idea that like, a lot of people are thankfully writing about and putting the emphasis on like what happens to the students. Obviously they have a lot of difficulties around kind of transferring and those things. So like knowing that it's like there are real world sort of like impacts on people who earnestly were just trying to pursue their goals and dreams and everything. And I mean, I feel like I don't see enough like really quantifying, because essentially an institution closing is like 100% layoffs. Like, like, cause you see the stuff that's like, oh, this one school over here is laying off like 10% of their staff. And it's like, oh, that's, that's a shame. But it's like, everybody's losing their job there. Like all the staff, all the faculty and everybody, like that's also just sort of like disruptive of like, what are all those people going to do? But so one sort of clarifying, this could maybe be a quick answer, is like, do you see like mergers and acquisitions as like a saving grace? Because that's sort of like even just another sort of whole new concept for higher ed, is that like that is becoming just increasingly, normalized, I guess, that like, you see some bigger institutions. I know like Northeastern, I think, is one of the ones that like really has been pretty active with doing M&A and everything. Like, is that like a saving grace, or is that just sort of like something that will continue to happen? Like, I'm just like, I don't know necessarily what to make of it, if it's like even is like a good or a bad thing. It is what it is. Like,
so like with everything else, it depends. And I can give you a terrible story about merging. But I can also share, I'm starting to see some examples where people understand that the experience needs to be positive for you, and you should try and do less harm. Georgia State merging with Perimeter College, they have been able to dramatically improve outcomes for those students. Was I a person on the ground working at that place? And do I understand what morale is like? No. And I think, at every institution, we should think about those things. But I think that's the first example where I'm seeing a merging actually led to dramatic improvement. I think we have to look for more examples like that and unpack how you make the experience for the human being as painless and positive as possible. We have examples of how we honor when something is passed. When we have to sunset a program or transition, we have emeritus. So we need to actually figure out, how do you honor the past while actually leading to people wanting to be a part of a new identity? There's a way to do it. One of the things higher ed really struggles with is understanding, if we're doing anything, it's with human beings. And it's not touchy-feely or woo-woo to care about the experience of the human being and to actually be wanting to study that and lean in and be curious, because there are ways to make change feel good. There are ways to make, most change sucks. Most change is awful, unless it was your idea. And even then, it probably isn't that great of an experience. So we really have to be obsessed with the human being. For me, it's the most important human being is the student. Looking at those case study examples of how you merge a culture and do it with actually an improved outcome will be great. I think we should be very hesitant about letting anyone who has closed an institution hold themselves up as an exemplar or a leader in the field who can claim that they know about how to help close an institution. Because the reason that institution closed is because you didn't make those leadership decisions and you were not actually an effective leader prior. And we should be, I know that there's going to be a group of these people who pop up, and I'm just saying, people, like, we need to hold the line that you don't get a claim that you're a strong leader and capable and a well-positioned consultant because you've shut down institutions. You shut it down. It was because you didn't make decisions on the front end, because you weren't proactive and anticipatory, and you weren't able to think about a business model evolution that's staring you in the face. So let's not let that group become like a thing. But otherwise, yeah, like, I mean, I think it's all going to depend on who does it well.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's like, hopefully, yeah, like an M&A would help, the institution in that rural area not have to like just completely shut down and it become like a ghost town or something. Like there's like parts of that I'm just like hopeful for. And like, yeah, if anything, yeah, if those people who are like, oh, I closed down the institution and if they want to talk, like what part of it is like, you could just like sit down, you don't have to, but I could imagine it would be very refreshing and powerful, I think, of like a panel of people who are humbly admitting their faults of like that idea of like, you know what, in hindsight, it was staring me in the face. I really should like, and just sort of like, kind of like, begging for forgiveness or something in a way, but just like a panel of people really trying to be like, okay, here's my cautionary tale for you guys. Like, I'm not trying to say like, I am like a expert that should be like heralded and lifted up and put on a pedestal or whatever. It's like, if anything, hopefully it could be people sharing cautionary tales, I guess, of just sort of like that idea that like, oh, we knew, like we saw the fork in the road. We kind of made the wrong choice. So to like, please be thoughtful about like the way that you're developing your strategy and, investing in sort of, whether it's digital education or just sort of like creating, better customer service for your students, like whatever, because I think like everybody's on their own journey. Like every institution's on their own journey of like where they're at, where they want to go and all that. So it's not as if it's like, well, everybody just needs to, have all their programs be fully online programs. It's like, well, maybe, but like, if you know that your institution is differentiating to be like that, in-person liberal arts, like, school, and you're able to do that, like, I don't know, like I guess like your take on like sort of, I guess how institutions should take advice like that of like seeing all these sort of cautionary tales play out. Like, I guess just any sort of anecdotes or perspectives on that sort of idea of like, okay, well, yeah, I'm feeling that urgency. Is it like, because I feel like the differentiation is like the better course of action than everybody just trying to be the same kind of monolithic type of institution, maybe.
The right thing is empathy. Empathy is the first step of design. And if people would just stop trying to make decisions to impress your board, who they don't actually know how to run this place either, and stop doing things for headlines and posturing. Just be obsessed with your customer. Learn from digital marketing, learn from marketing in general. If you're obsessed with your customer, they will show you and tell you what they want. You have to understand them. And the problem is we don't ever take the time to understand, like, look at the demographics of just the town that you exist in. Start going out and talking to people and understanding, why are you not in college? What kind of, what are your hopes and dreams, and understanding, are you here because you don't think you can do something better? Are you here because you love this? What would growth look like? Because every human wants to grow. And that's actually what the role of higher education is. And we have to understand that. Like, it used to be this idea that you like go to high school and then you work the rest of your life, or you go to college, or you go to community college and then you work the rest of your life, or you go to universities and you work the rest of your life. And it has to become a place that people come to and from anytime they want to learn and grow. We have to have doors that are super fluid and easy to come in and out. It's super intuitive. The experience is very customer experience. Like, think about when you pick up, like, there's so much user-centered design in the world. Like, I always use like Lyft and Uber and Amazon as good examples, or DoorDash. Like, when you use something that they thought about your needs. That is what it needs to be like. And if you are truly obsessed with your customer, with figuring out what your local community, what your state need, then you will focus on the data. You won't lead the witness. We always lead the witness, where we're like, how do I get more MBAs? No, that is not the question. Wrong question. The question is, what do these people need? And what might that look like? And then you try a prototype, and then you beta test. Like, you try and actually meet their needs instead of figure out how to shoehorn them into this like 1980s thing that you already got this one program, so I'm going to find a way to get more butts and seats. That is always the answer. And that has been the thing that we have struggled with as a sector. And we struggle with it, by the way, with human beings who work at universities. Like, if there's a differentiator about the UIA, it's my obsession with user-centered design. Like, I want our events to actually center the person. I want you to go home feeling like you actually got work done. You made new friends, you got new ideas, but wow, you feel invigorated. Like, and you don't know, because I've had those experiences and I want more of them. I want, when our network does anything, I want them to be like, not sure why, but wow, that really actually was easier. And it made me feel like you actually thought about my needs instead of being like shoved into a group. We just have to do that with students, because I swear to you, there is an answer in every place, because there is no limit. If you think about the number of people who are born in society, and if you look at the gaps that are emerging, it is very clearly a sign that there is a significant need for education. People want to grow and learn. They're just getting it from places that are actually meeting their needs. They're going on YouTube. They're listening to podcasts. If we could stop dismissing those things as not respectable enough or not fancy or credentialed enough, and we could recognize that the innate needs of a human to grow and evolve, those are what we need to lean into. And people want to be able to feed their families, and people want to be able to feel like they have found a way to like fill the, Bridget shaped hole in the world. Like, I'm trying to figure out what am I supposed to do in this life? And for right now, this is it. But I might need new skills to be able to figure out what I'm going to be next, right? Like, people are trying to figure out their purpose. That is we have so much to offer in that moment if we would stop trying to shoehorn people into it, whatever we already had. Because I think that faculty are curious and they are brilliant and can actually figure out solutions to things once we help them. Once we figure out their problems, all the people who work in higher ed actually care about students. They actually want to do good work. And what we have to offer is meaningful and valuable. We are just letting this unwillingness to recognize that perhaps we could learn more if we shut our mouths and we become like genuinely interested in the people we're trying to serve. I think that that's the solution. That's how you stop canceling institutions. You expand your enrollment base. I think you would find how to serve adult learners. You would make transfer better. You would be able to eliminate equity gaps. Be obsessed with your customer, be obsessed with following the data. Stop trying to tell them what they need.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I feel like you got on your soapbox there and it was so incredible. Like just the passion and it was so great. Cause I think, that hopefully is, again, like providing like an urgency or sort of like a call to action, in the sense of like, that idea of your, going out in the community and listening to people. It's like, you might end up with sort of like ideas or things to do that look and feel different than like, the institution down the road kind of thing. It was like, but that's okay because like you're listening to people and you're getting actual feedback versus like you're saying like leading the witness of being like, what type of MBA program would you like to enroll in? And it's like, that's making a lot of presumptions about what it was like being like, okay, what would you feel like you would need to get where you want to go? Or like, where do you want to go? And what do you feel like you need? And so like if those right questions and being really empathetic. And like you said, it's like, you could end up with a lot of information and it could feel very foreign or because it's like it is challenging so many paradigms, but it's like that's good. Like use that to kind of evolve into something that deliberately may have you looking different than a lot of other schools. Because I think that's kind of part of the idea that like I think all the like college XYZ where they're being like, oh, we want to be like this global and this whatever, and it's like, okay, everybody wants to be like college global, like and that to me ends up where it feels like, okay, everybody's just going to try to be like all things to all people, kind of monolithic or whatever. And it's like I think there is some space for those kind of endeavors, but also I think being trying to encourage institutions to maybe counterbalance that with like a hyper local focus to really kind of address those unique needs, preferences, or the assets that they have in their kind of local community and stuff. So I think a lot to chew on, and again, just I love
it could be global too, by the way. It could be AI. What AI is doing with every industry right now, there is a new market need developing in real time. Just look at how people are sharing ChatGPT prompts. If we can just let ourselves be curious, I think. Stop just focusing on delivering what you already be. Like curiosity has always been the best thing for me. And I'm very grateful for a job that lets me kind of use it on a regular basis. But like, just be curious. But like, there are new markets emerging like right in front of your face. You could probably just make a micro offering, turn it into something, I think it doesn't have to be in your local community. It's like just curiosity.
Yeah. And sometimes that idea that it's like, there's never going to be like a simple answer. It's kind of the idea where like somebody like, oh, what should we do? Should it be like local, in person, online? But it's like all the above. Like do it like a little bit of everything. That idea of like something like AI changing, so many industries and how people just live and work and all that. It's like, well, yeah, you may not be able to, and maybe you just have to kind of right size for it. If you're going to be like hyper local focused and be serving, like a community college, there's a space for them to kind of survive and thrive. But then if it's like other institutions need to kind of like maybe try to do kind of all the above, where it's like, yeah, we're, big state institution, big university, we need to have sort of our physical presence, but also not be sort of neglecting or ignoring what's happening with like, AI and everything else. So, Yeah, but a lot to chew on, and you did kind of set up my next question. That I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity about with like the UIA summit that's coming up. We're recording this in July. I know it's coming up in a couple months, but can you tease anything for us about the upcoming
Yeah.
summit? I know you're like celebrating 10 years and a lot of cool stuff going on, but anything you can tease and share at this point?
So you're getting my vibe that like everything we create, we're trying to actually make it better, and it's always around the user. And so that's like, think of the UIA Summit as that, which is I'm always trying to create something I wish existed. I know I've gone to experiences where I felt like I was able to reflect and get clarity and go back home feeling like, oh, I figured out the work that we need to be doing. I actually got time to work on it. And like, now we're ready to go. Well, I wish something like that existed for my team. I keep seeing that time and time, that institutions, like, we just never have time to actually get on the same page and clarify, like, are we moving towards our goal? What is the work that we're doing? What is working and what's not? Let's stop doing that stuff. And then let's actually figure out what the best strategies are that exist, that currently are proven. Let's actually talk to the people who are using those. Let's get those insights. But let's come up with a plan and be able to go back home feeling like we are invigorated, inspired, and have new allies to be able to do the work. I am clearly aware that our summit is going to be 2 weeks before the election. That's on purpose. I think that higher education is going to need resilience for the next chapter. We need to have our head in the game. We need to have a plan for either scenario, for whatever is going to happen in your state in terms of leadership changes and governing board shifts and all these things, right? And so the underlying all of this is a desire to make an experience that is a gift to the sector. Because the UIA only exists because someone else held an event and a group of presidents were able to meet in a side room and talk about the things they wished, like, wow, I wish I could scale that. I wish that I wasn't like, it wasn't so isolating to work on this kind of stuff. I want to actually find someone to try and build something for the competitiveness of the future of America. That's what happened. And so we're trying to do that, but for the field. So it's a beacon that if you want to do a better job for your students, if you're looking for the best ideas, and if you believe that going it alone is a dumb way to go, and you'd actually like to figure out how to make it so that you have allies and you have the supports to make it so that your work would be easier, so you don't have to try and like guess what the right move is. We are setting up an experience that people will come. We want you to come as a team because we know how hard it is to go home and try and evangelize. It's going to be full of inspiration and invigorating things. Michael Sorrell, Michael Crow, Tim Rennick, me, all like that. That's just the baseline. But then we're other folks right now are trying to look for the right speaker who can speak to team strategy. I think it's probably going to be sports coaching, but also resilience. There's going to be some cool stuff there where people actually get to work on the skill of the physical embodiment of resilience, so that you keep your head in the game. And we actually have a plan, and people go home and they feel like no matter what, we can actually do this. We're going to be able to make progress. And so it's like, if there was an experience that was like super, I mean, I'm not saying like, I know problematic Tony Robbins, but like, imagine that, but for a team, but for universities to actually get the boost that they needed. So they went home and they felt like they could go faster. If you came to the UI Summit in 2018, you know that there was nothing ever like it before. And what I wanted was to model what I thought events should be like, so that people were better because they went there and they actually did stuff. They actually took action. And we wanted to raise people's standards about what we spend our money on and our time. And I feel like that worked a little. And now we get a chance to do it one more time at year 10. So I hope you'll come. It's going to be an experience that you will regret not coming to. It's like, you're getting my vibe here, and we're going to be obsessed with making this something that feels like you really got the boost that you needed. And it's also going to be set up naturally for networks to form and for you to find like-minded peers to form. And we're actually right now, I'm trying to get I'm fundraising for a pitch competition, so that if you decide to do new work together as a collective at the end, that the funders are in the audience to actually support it. Because again, we want more alliances to form naturally and for it to be easier. And I think that's our gift to the sector, is to make it so that people stop working in silos. And I feel like it's going to be amazing. And so I hope you come. It's going to sell out. because I can't, because I have to pay for it. It just is. So you're going to want to register very quickly. And I only have room for 450 people. It's going to be intimate. It's going to be high value impact. And so that's the summit, October 23rd through the 25th in Tempe, Arizona.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's like also kind of a good, like, obviously if you kind of are maybe having some of those constraints, like where it's like, okay, well, here's a space we can use. It can only hold so many people, but then it's like really recognizing that there is sort of like a unique magic to kind of just being like, okay, it's this many people. Cause I think like so many events, it's just like anybody and everybody who can't like just come. And it's like, that can be nice where it's like, you can have sort of random collisions of different people, but then it's just, I feel like it could become kind of unruly, but I've appreciated those sort of smaller events to have exactly kind of what you're talking about, like just a really more, meaningful kind of like network building and everything. But and I love that idea of like trying to I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, almost like try to inspire like what's like the next UIA, like another like great consortium and sort of group that can come together and do the work. Because I love that sort of like kind of just networked approach that like certain like states or cities and different things, like they'll have versions of it, and I always love when I see that. So I appreciate that you're trying to like help inspire and set up the next UIA that can go do some amazing stuff. So we'll wrap up here. I'll give you kind of the final word. If there's any sort of just like pieces of advice, things that you want to make sure you sort of like bold, circle, underline, highlight from what you've shared, all your kind of passionate just kind of perspectives that you share that I really appreciate. Just like anything that you want to kind of wrap everything up with, kind of final pieces of advice for other hired leaders right now.
I would say this work matters more than ever. Don't be disheartened by any of the stuff that you're seeing that's going on. This is an opportunity for us to finally do this work right, to do it faster, to do it better for students. And there is no limit to the need for what we do. People want to learn and grow. I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. It's going to be bumpy and there are going to be hard things, but what we do, like the future of this country and the world, demands that we get out of our own way and we make it so that any person can achieve their full potential in life. And our job is to activate their talent. And I think that there is a tremendous demand for that because there are brilliant people born into like every corner of society that could possibly solve the big problems facing the world. And it's our job to find them and to unleash that talent. And so do not lose hope that because of whatever's going on today, that what we're doing is going away, or because there is tremendous need, and this work is super important and it's super valuable. And take care of yourself, because I feel like, again, put the human at the center. We have to make it sustainable.
Like we're all humans too. So appreciate you, appreciate your passion, appreciate your time, all that you shared. We'll have ways to connect with you, UIA, and to check out the summit in the show notes. But this has been a treat, an honor. Thank you so much for hanging out for the show.
Thanks for having me.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.